She finished the project that made her famous, and then, before the paint had time to dry, she walked into a house that hadn't been touched since 2005, shone a flashlight into a flooded basement in the dark, and said she was doing it all over again. That's Tia Weston, a woman who bought a house for $1, built a following of nearly 700,000 people around the renovation, and just signed herself up for a sequel that's harder in every way that matters. By the time this video is done, you'll understand why the news she's breaking isn't a setback. It's the only move she's ever known how to make. The housing market in 2024 was not friendly to anyone trying to get started. Prices were climbing. Interest rates were high. The conversation everywhere was about how young Americans were being priced out of homeownership, how the traditional path to building equity had quietly closed for an entire generation. Tia Weston was 29 years old and living in North Dakota. She had no formal background in construction, no family real estate business, no investment portfolio behind her. What she had was a willingness to move somewhere most people weren't moving to, and an eye for what a neglected house could become with enough work. 3 years before the $1 house became her story, she had already run the experiment once. She bought a property in North Dakota for $60,000, renovated it herself with help from people around her, and sold it for a $30,000 profit. That's not a fortune, but it was proof. Proof that the math could work. Proof that a woman with no formal training and a willingness to do the hard parts herself could turn a neglected building into real money. She started looking for her next property, found one, made an offer, and then the deal fell apart. The foundation was compromised beyond what made sense to take on. The same seller who had that bad foundation house, however, mentioned something else, something he hadn't been able to bring himself to part with. A property that wasn't even on the market. And if you think the foundation problem was the hard part of this story, the real story starts right now. The property the seller mentioned was his childhood home. It had no running water, no functioning heat, no working electrical wiring. It had sat long enough in disrepair that the local fire department had scheduled it for a controlled burn, a training exercise where the building would simply be destroyed. He didn't want to watch that happen. It was actually going to go to a fire training course, where they would set it on fire because it was in that bad shape, and he didn't want to see that happen, Weston told the Times. So he made her an offer that didn't exist anywhere in the conventional real estate world. He told her he would basically give it away if someone was willing to fix it. She went through with it. They drew up the sale paperwork for $1 for a 100-year-old house with no utilities, no structural guarantee, and no renovation roadmap, in North Dakota. In a climate where winters regularly push temperatures to minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit, most people in her position, with no construction credentials, no contractor experience, no safety net, would have walked away from that call. The risk was obvious. The path forward was not. What she did instead is the part nobody talks about enough. Tia Weston did not have a team of contractors she was project managing from a distance. She was in the house, in the cold, with tools she had taught herself to use, facing problems she had never encountered before, and learning the solutions in real time, often from the people watching her do it. That is not a metaphor. Her comment section functioned as a job site advisory board. I have learned a lot from them because there are a lot of people who fix up houses for a living, she said. They'll leave comments saying, "I ran into this too, here's how you do it." What built the audience wasn't just the renovation. It was the honesty of the process. The moments where the problem was clearly bigger than she expected. The moments where she stopped, looked at the camera, and said she wasn't sure what to do yet. She filmed in temperatures that would close most work sites. She documented setbacks alongside progress. And the people watching recognized what they were seeing. Not a polished home improvement show, but someone actually doing it. By the time she was halfway through the $1 house, she had passed 100,000 subscribers. The audience kept growing because the project never felt resolved. Every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. Mountain Time, there was another piece of the answer. One phone call, one conversation. That's all it took to change the direction of everything. And what followed after the $1 house was done is the part that reframes the whole story. In August of 2025, Tia Weston published a video that most of the coverage about her channel has never mentioned. She gave the previous owner, the man who had sold her his childhood home for $1, a full tour of what the house had become. A year after signing the $1 paperwork, he walked back through the rooms where he had grown up. He saw what she had built out of what had nearly been burned to the ground. There is no way to overstate what that moment represents in the context of this story. The entire premise of the $1 purchase was rooted in the seller's emotional attachment to the property. He gave it away rather than watch it destroyed. The renovation wasn't just Tia's project. It was, in a real sense, the preservation of someone else's memory. That video exists. That tour happened. And it is the emotional anchor point of everything that came before and everything that comes after. Because 3 months later, she announced the chapter was over. The $1 house was done. And the number that came next, nobody who had been following this channel from the beginning expected it. On November 2nd, 2025, Tia Weston published a video titled, "My $1 House is Done. What's Next?" At the end of that video, she told her audience to come back the following Sunday, because she already had the answer. She had purchased another abandoned house. The second property was not a cleaned-up version of the $1 house challenge. It was not a simpler project with better bones. It had been sealed and untouched since 2005. 20 years of standing still. It had a basement that had previously flooded. When she went down there for the first time with a camera and no electricity, she panned the flashlight across 2 basement bedrooms and stopped. "I always like to look for people and animals before I start talking to you all," she said, "or else I just think there's something over my shoulder the whole time." She described the energy in the basement as quite weird. She confirmed the flood damage had left the lower level in a state that would cost significant money to fix, or enormous amounts of time. She wasn't sure yet which it would be. The audience she had when she started the $1 house was around 100,000 people. The audience she had when she walked into that basement was approaching 600,000. At this point in the story, most people walked away. What she did instead is the part nobody talks about. The number 669,000 doesn't fully communicate what happened to Tia Weston's channel between the $1 house announcement and the moment she stepped into the second project. Her Facebook page had passed 1.35 million followers. Her Instagram was closing in on 375,000. Brand deals with Skims and Factor had arrived. She was no longer a niche renovation creator with a specific story. She was a platform. And the question of what came next carried weight it hadn't carried before. The $1 house worked as a content premise because the outcome was uncertain. Every video in the series asked whether she would actually pull it off. That tension is what drove the algorithm, and that tension is now gone. The house is done. The question has been answered. The second house has to rebuild that uncertainty from scratch. It has to earn the audience's attention all over again. And it is doing so with the added pressure of a flooded basement, a property that has been left alone for 2 decades, and an audience that now numbers in the hundreds of thousands on multiple platforms simultaneously. As of early May 2026, the exterior work on the second property is progressing. She published a video this week showing the outside of the building starting to come together. The comments are active. The uploads are consistent. Every Sunday she's still there. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. Here's what the comments kept asking, And here's the answer they never got. Until now. The $1 house was never really about the house. It was about a generation of people who were told that homeownership was the path to stability, and then watched the doors close as prices climbed past what any reasonable savings plan could reach. Tia Weston did not solve that problem. She found a gap in it. She moved to a place most people weren't moving to. She learned skills she hadn't been taught. She took a risk that most financial advisors would have flagged immediately, a condemned property with no utilities purchased for $1, and she documented every part of what happened next. The people who watched were not all aspiring renovators. They were people who felt the weight of a housing market that had stopped making sense. And they found in this woman filming herself in a North Dakota house at -20 degrees, something that felt like a possible answer. She sold her first North Dakota house for a $30,000 profit. She turned a scheduled demolition into a home. And now she's standing inside a building that's been sealed since 2005 with a flashlight and a camera, starting the same experiment over again. The channel description still reads, "Turning my abandoned house into a cozy home." The word abandoned is doing a lot of work in that sentence. And the reason this story spread as far as it did is because for a lot of people watching, that word resonated in ways that had nothing to do with real estate. Tia Weston built her channel on the premise that the hardest thing is starting, and that the second hardest thing is starting again after you've already finished once. She's in the middle of that second start right now. The exterior of the new project is taking shape. The basement problems are ahead of her. The audience is watching every Sunday, just like they were before. The question her next chapter has to answer is whether a premise that worked once can carry the same emotional weight the second time. When the mystery is already solved, the audience is larger, and the stakes are higher in ways that weren't true the first time around. Do you think the second abandoned house will hit the same way as the $1 house, or was lightning not meant to strike twice in the same place? Let me know what you think below.